he will be part of a three-man booth on CBS, the NFL on CBS this fall. Love this guy. Love working with him. I hope to get to continue to work with him. Formerly of the Breakfast Table, now sitting here on the Rich Eisen Show, Super Bowl champion and a good friend, Jason McCourty. How are you, Jason?
I'm doing well. I'm just listening to your travel experience.
Yes, sir.
As you're saying that, I got 18 weeks, so hopefully I don't get rerouted or anything. And my seat that CBS books, it keeps me right where I need to be.
Yeah, you have CBS Travel will handle it for you, Jason. I was, I was mostly without a net yesterday, but I did have some people who I could help and lean on and whatever. But it's all good. It's all good. I am here, and you will be in the booth this season with Andrew Catalon and TK Barber with AJ Ross on the sideline for CBS. But we all know who your first three-man booth was with, right, Jason? Correct? Right?
Hey, no one can take away the memories in Germany that we had. Me, you, and our guy Dan Orlovsky. It was an absolute blast. So who knows? Maybe we'll get to do it again in the future.
That was, and it was Chiefs and Dolphins last year. And interestingly enough, that was the conversation I led this show with, Jason, was the NFL Top 100 on NFL Network, with Tyreek Hill being 1 and Mahomes 4. Do you agree with that ordering of events, Jason?
I mean, as soon as you see a list and you see Mahomes is at 4, it kind of just taints the list. Mahomes, I think, should be number 1. That doesn't mean Tyreek Hill isn't deserving to be all the way up there in the top. If you want to put him at 2, put him at 2. What I love when this list comes out is I just love all the controversy that surrounds it. Jalen Johnson took a shot at Aaron Rodgers. He called a stray because he was 92 on the list and he didn't play. And through my experiences in the league, the NFL Top 100 was always a mixed bag of how guys felt, because they'd come around, you'd have the sheets where you had to put your 20 players on it. And I remember one year, Jacksonville, the people came in there like, Jacksonville, they did an awesome job. They filled out every sheet they were on. That year, Jacksonville had about 8 guys in the top 100. So there's always some conversations that always surrounds it. But, I mean, Tyreek Hill has been unbelievable since getting in Miami. But with Patrick Mahomes, I mean, back-to-back Super Bowls, you cannot not have that guy as a number 1 player.
But again, what we were discussing at the top, because, Jason, you know me, you know what I like to stand for here is to add a little nuance to it as well. The voting takes place mostly during the playing season, though, right? Before the playoffs,
yeah.
Correct? Yeah. And last year, Tyreek, right up until December, was red hot, with the exception of that game against the Chiefs when we had the ball ripped away from him. Mm-hmm. I think it was by Snead and then McDuffie. At any rate, long story short is that led to the eventual go-ahead or game-winning score. He was on fire and Mahomes was not. Does that really matter? Is there a nuanced thought by voters in their heads about the current, or do you look at the whole scope of everything where you would think Mahomes would be 1, right?
I mean, without a doubt, there is a nuance to it, because during the regular season, we talked about the Chiefs offense. You remember the December game where they're playing against the Las Vegas Raiders, and they give up 2 touchdowns on offense. I think it was a pick 6 and a forced fumble that got picked up and a touchdown. So you got to put yourself, I guess, in the position of those guys. If that's the time that you're coming into your locker room and you're watching the Chiefs, you may not disrespect the Chiefs, but you're like, hey, realistically, this season, Mahomes isn't having his best season. But at the end of the day, I think what we found out is you just don't go against that guy. And I think that's one of those things that they redid the list at the end of the season. You talk about it with the NBA all the time, too, is an MVP will come out during the regular season and someone catches fire and takes off in the playoffs, and they're hoisting the trophy at the end of the NBA champions. And you're like, well, maybe the same thing was the MVP this year with Lamar Jackson. We saw the season that Patrick Mahomes ended up finishing with, but that didn't take away from Lamar. So I think it's one of those tough things, but the list comes out now. And for everybody looking at a list that includes football players, and you're saying the top 100 of them, and Patrick Mahomes isn't as number 1, if you got to put an asterisk and say when the voting was, it just takes away from the list.
Yeah, I know that. And again, not much nuance or gray area when somebody can use something to fuel their fire, right, Jason? And you've been around some greats in your 13 years of playing. Do you got a good story of being around somebody where you couldn't believe a teammate of yours, or even if it's you, utilized something that seemed off or weird or maybe not factual to fuel their fire? You got a story like that from anybody?
I feel like I feel like that was Julian Edelman every single week. I feel like when we were playing with him, and he was the type of guy that at the end of practice, you bring it up in the huddle, especially on that team. Brady may speak, Matthew Slater may speak, my brother Devin McCourty would speak. But whenever Jules got in the front and he was getting ready to say something, it was just like everybody was all ears because you didn't know what direction this thing was going to go in. He was the one right after Bill's talking, and Bill would hype up whatever team we were playing. They could have 2 wins on the season. He's talking about how good of a football team. And then Jules would come up right after and be like, all right, this is a trap game, boys. And you're just like, well, Bill just said they're good. Now you're saying we're in a trap game. We're playing against a poor team. Jules was that guy that no matter what, he'd be going against a practice squad guy, and he'd be in a pushing and a shoving match because the practice squad guys had talked some trash to him on something that happened. So he was a guy that no matter what, he found something to motivate him. He was probably still pissed off from playing football with the golden flashes of being a quarterback to now being a receiver of what people said coming out from the draft. So he was a fun guy to compete against every single day because you didn't know what type of mood he was going to be in.
Whatever makes you great, right, Jason? You know, whatever.
No doubt about it.
You know, without
no doubt about it.
Jason McCourty of CBS here on the Rich Eisen Show. So, you know, obviously CBS is predominantly on the AFC side of the ball. What are your thoughts on the Chiefs entering this three-peat campaign and potentially being better? What do you think about that idea here?
And it's crazy, as you say, potentially being better because defense, they lost some guys, specifically L'Jarius Sneed in that secondary that I think somebody's going to have to step up and take over because what he did on the defensive side of the ball, shutting receivers down last year, was unbelievable. But when you flip it over and you look at the offense, and we're in that era now in training camp where we're always seeing the clips that come out. And Xavier Worthy is running down the field and it's a 50-yard bomb. Then Hollywood Brown is running down the field and it's another bomb from Mahomes as he's rolling out to his left. So you watch what they were able to do last year. And now coming back where now you've equipped Patrick Mahomes with more weapons and more speed to get down the field. And a guy like Travis Kelce, who's been obviously the best tight end in the NFL for however long now you've just created more space on the offensive side of the ball for him to be able to work as he's getting older in his career. So I look at the Chiefs, and they're the team to beat in the AFC. You can talk about Lamar Jackson. You can talk about him adding Derrick Henry. You can talk about Joe Burrow being healthy and all these different guys in the AFC, which is going to be fun to watch. But when you're the king, you're the king. And that's Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs this upcoming season because they proved to us last year that having less on offense, when it came down to it in the playoffs going on the road in Baltimore, they were able to win that game on the play of Mahomes and what he was able to do. Mecole Hardman caught the touchdown pass to win the Super Bowl. I don't think anybody was thinking that was going to happen as we watched them fall apart against the Raiders on Christmas Day, and they still found a way to come up victorious.
That's why he's the number one player in the NFL, right, Jason?
You said it.
Yeah, I think he walks it. You know what I mean? So moving on, the NFC. Want you handicap that one for me here as we're about a month out, Jason? What do you think?
I'm so excited to see the Houston Texans on the AFC side. I wanted to get that in because that's my first game. Houston and Indy.
Oh,
the NFC side, yeah.
Okay, that's
the NFC side. All we're talking about is the Dallas Cowboys. And obviously with everything we're going on with Jerry Jones, and we're talking about Dak Prescott not being paid, CeeDee Lamb, Micah Parsons, that is taken away, I feel like, from some of the other teams like the Green Bay Packers and the Detroit Lions, of teams that are coming off fantastic years. And the Lions is a team that I want to see as they've been in a brawl this morning in the Giants practice as that's going on not far from me at their stadium. But the Detroit Lions, you think about what they were able to do last year, and that was coming in with all the pressure and everybody talking about how good of a team they were going to be with all the additions they had. And Dan Campbell now, this team finally had the culture that he wanted, and they lived up to the expectations. And I remember last year, Dan Campbell said after they lost that game it's so hard to get back and there's no guarantee that you're going to get an opportunity to do so. But I look at this team and what they're made up of. And as you know, I'm watching Receiver on Netflix and Amon-Ra St. Brown, his attitude and the way he attacks the games and just his work ethic, I think that's the character of that entire team. And he's a guy that they show on there where he doesn't get selected to the Pro Bowl. And he said he probably wasn't as mad as when he got drafted as late as he did, but he was really pissed off. And I feel like that's the way I would describe the entire Detroit Lions team, is they're always pissed off. So even with the success they had last year and Jared Goff continuing to play at an extremely high level, I think they still approach this season pissed off, and they just continue to get better and better. I don't think they're a team that's going to fall by the wayside because they had success last year and they didn't know how to handle it. I think they're still hungry, and I think they're a team in the NFC who I would say is my favorite right now to possibly come out.
Okay. That's Jason, that has been a widely held belief by most everybody we've had on in the last week plus, is that the line, like Daniel Jeremiah, our buddy said, when I asked him last year, give me the NFC team that will go further this year than they did last year. He said the Lions. And he got upset with me because, that forced him to reveal a Super Bowl pick at the end of July. You know what I mean? Like he's like, don't make me do this. But a lot of people are high on the Lions, hugely so right now.
Yeah, and they deserve it, especially with the additions they made on the defensive side of the ball, because that's where they were lacking some. And they brought in a guy like Terrion Arnold in the secondary to help them. They brought in my guy, Carlton Davis from Tampa Bay, a guy who plays a lot of man-to-man to help them on that defensive side of the ball and hopefully take them to that next level where they're finishing the game to get to the Super Bowl.
Did you hear Quinyon Mitchell, the rookie out of Toledo in Philadelphia, apparently has told both Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown that their routes were and all that? Basically, did you hear that? He said that?
I saw that. I saw the guys are welcoming the trash talk coming from the young cornerback. And playing that position, you got to love that, because that is a position on the football field that you have to have the ultimate confidence, because no matter what, especially for him, you're talking about A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith. These are two of the best receivers in the NFL, and you can argue they're a top duo in the league alongside Miami and Cincinnati's duo. So you're getting a chance to compete against these guys every single day. If he can go out there and confidently shut those guys down in practice, when you're going into the game, it's going to be like a cakewalk for him of seeing those two guys in one-on-ones and 7-on-7 and throughout practice. But you got to have that belief. I remember talking to Aeneas Williams when I was probably in my second or third year in the league. I can't remember. I was at a Super Bowl in Indianapolis. It was 2010. And he came up to me and he was asking me about my approach when I'm playing corner. He said, you're in press technique. You get up to the line of scrimmage. What's going through your mind? Are you thinking, man, I hope this guy doesn't beat me on a 9 route on a go ball? Or are you thinking, man, it's going to be hell for him to try to catch any type of pass on me? And that, to me, is the difference when you're playing that position of the guys that are ultimately extremely good and get into that greats and possibly Hall of Fame fashion, of where guys you have that are just good players and they may be consistent, they play at a decent level. But those guys that walk up to that line of scrimmage with that mindset, is it's going to be hell for you to beat me, or the guys I think get to that elite level.
Talking about the Eagles rookie caused me to come up with a sports talk radio question for you, Jason McCourty. Which NFC East team that got one and done in last year's playoffs, Eagles, Cowboys, which one do you think will go further this year?
I'm going with the Eagles. I think for the Philadelphia Eagles, they fell apart last season. There was so much going on that unless you were on the inside, you had no idea of what you could exactly put your thumb on and say, this is the reason this team fell apart. But I go back to a year before that when they had Shane Steichen as their offensive coordinator. They had John Gannon as their defensive coordinator, and Sirianni was the guy just leading them all. But you had two really good football coaches, which we really can see now as we watch Arizona compete last year, and then what Shane Steichen was able to do with Gardner Minshew when Anthony Richardson goes down. Well, this year they brought in Vic Fangio to coach the defense, and they brought in Kellen Moore to coach the offense. So I think this is getting back to the Philadelphia we saw 2 years ago, of a team that now Sirianni maybe is a little bit removed, and he's allowing his coaches to kind of set the tone and lead this pack. And especially, I think, on the offensive side of the ball, because Jalen Hurts didn't play his best football last year coming off that big contract he signed in the offseason. And we all talk about his work ethic and who he is as a person and his character and just how cool Jalen Hurts is. I think you give him a guy like Kellen Moore that he can probably communicate with on a daily basis. They're going to be on the same page. Kellen Moore, a guy who's done it. He was with the Chargers last year with Justin Herbert, but was with Dak Prescott as Dak was top in the league in all the categories that you can come up with, even when the Cowboys let him go. This is a guy that was in contention for a head coach a few years ago. And I think he's going to look at this opportunity going to this Eagles team who offensively they fell a little bit behind last year. If he can turn this thing around, we may be talking about Kellen Moore as a potential head coaching candidate this next season.
All right, last one for you, Jason McCourty. Just going full circle. I had my fun with you talking about how you're going to be in a three-man booth with CBS this fall, but you were in a three-man booth with me and Dan Orlovsky for the first game in Frankfurt last year between the Chiefs and the Dolphins. A week later is where I'd like to finish up with you, when Orlovsky tapped out and went back to the warm embrace of the worldwide leader in sports, and you and I were there for the Patriots-Colts game. And I think we were there. Well, I know we were there, but I think we witnessed the true end of the Mac Jones era. 2 horrible interceptions. Belichick turns to Bailey Zappi, who hadn't thrown a pass in a game in over a month. At the end of the game, a fake spike interception ended it. But I also remember before the game, we're standing out there on the turf and running around the perimeter of the stadium, just getting ready, just getting some juices flowing, was Jerod Mayo. And I let the two of you guys talk because, obviously there was a lot of hot talk that this might be Bill's last game, that Bob Kraft might bounce Bill if they lost the game, and it would be Mayo's gig as an interim. Like, that was the conversation for real that was happening in Germany at the time. And I'm just wondering, now that Mayo does have the job, and it did wind up being Belichick's final year there, how do you think he's equipped to bring along Drake Maye in a way that Belichick and the staff around were not for Mac Jones, Jason? Because that's a huge conversation in New England right now. What do you think?
I think the key is going to be consistency. And I actually was just at their training camp this weekend on Saturday. And the one thing that everybody's buzzing about, their players and coaches alike, is the positive energy that's just in the building right now, of how Jerod Mayo is leading everybody. When things come up, we saw Matthew Judon. He was out there at practice. He wasn't practicing. That became a big storyline. And since then, we haven't heard anything. Judon's back at practice. Mayo's back at practice. And they're talking about it in a way of, you know what, we're moving on. Something came up. We handled it as a team in-house, and now we're moving forward. And I think for Jerod Mayo, when you talk about Drake Maye and even Joe Milton on that, you have 2 rookie quarterbacks. I think part of what Jerod Mayo and Elliott Wolf did was you brought a guy like Jacoby Brissett in. And I think for him, he's a guy from a leadership standpoint, is he can set the tone for the room. I think that's a part of when you're coaching, especially at that head coaching spot, you have to equip your team with the right coordinators on both sides of the ball to be leaders. But you got to have leaders in those rooms at those positions so guys can learn from. When I first came into the league as a rookie cornerback, it was Chris Hope and Cortland Finnegan that were teaching me not only the defense, but how to be a pro. I think for Drake Maye, you're going to get a guy like Jacoby Brissett that's been in so many different scenarios that's going to help you learn how to be a pro. And that's what he's doing. He's following Jacoby and doing all the things that Jacoby's doing. When he's watching film, when he's getting in the tubs, those types of things, to be able to pick his brain and learn from him. And the other part is putting that coordinator, Alex Van Pelt, a guy that was in Cleveland with Jacoby Brissett, was there last year when they went through quarterback after quarterback after quarterback before Joe Flacco got there. And he's a guy who's coached quarterbacks in this league for so long and has had a lot of success. When you have somebody like that in his ear, he can continue to get better, because you mentioned Mac Jones. Mac Jones' rookie year, he's doing the gritty in the Pro Bowl.
Yeah, no.
And now
he was great.
Yeah, exactly. And Josh McDaniels is gone, and next thing you know, everything falls to the wayside.
Yeah. And so you think, because again, you were there, the hair was on fire in the Boston media about how poor Maye looked just 1 week ago, as you and I are talking right now. And there's no questions, you think, about the way that Mayo and everybody can bring it along. And I appreciate you bringing up Joe Milton, but if Milton plays over Maye, there's a major problem. You know what I mean? So
yeah, and I don't see that happening. I think the thing is, too, when Joe Milton's in there and you're watching practice, Joe Milton's going with the 3s, Drake Maye's going with the 2s. Practices are scripted in a certain way.
Sure.
So I think sometimes when we watch training camp and we see a guy throw an interception, well, he could be coached right now to say, you know what, hey, we want you to take those chances in those moments to see how far you can push it as we're getting ready for these games. I think Jerod Mayo has said it all along. Like, they brought Jacoby in because he's a guy that they feel like can play right now. So, of course, when Drake Maye is your 3rd overall pick, when he gets there, we all want to see him in the game and we want to see success right away. But it's in his best benefit where if he's not ready to play right now, you just need to see steady improvement and him picking up the system and getting it. But that's why a guy like Jacoby's there. So I wouldn't read too much into, Drake Maye had a bad practice. There's times where you're going to go out there as a quarterback and you're still learning. We may implement something new today that you're trying to get the hang of, that maybe in the next few days it picks up a little bit better. But you want to see quarterbacks in practice pushing the ball downfield. Like, I don't want to see you in practice and you're just checking the ball down and we walk away and we're like, we see all the numbers that the beat reporters do a great job. And it's just like, well, Drake Maye was 18 of 19 today for 27 yards. It's just like, we're not going to get anywhere as an offense with that. So take those opportunities to try to get better and push the ball and see what you can and can't do.
Jason, thanks for the time. Look forward to seeing you in the booth. You, Jason McCourty, Tiki Barber, and Andrew Catalon. Please tell me, does Catalon have a twin?
He doesn't. He's lacking in that. He's lacking in that department.
We could have had everybody in the booth have a twin.
We're going to see what we're going to see.
Are you and Tiki the first twin tandem ever to call games together in the history of the NFL? I mean, because I don't think, like Fouts didn't have a twin and Dennis Miller didn't have a twin. I'm just trying to go through three-man booths, But so this is a first, I think, for sure.
I think so too. So. Okay. It's really cool for me. Grew up watching TV. Now I'm in the booth with
how about that? Listen, Jason, thanks for the time. Texans Colts, a great first game. I can't wait to hear you on the call for that. You're awesome. I've seen it firsthand. 3-man booths, 2-man booths, what have you. Let's stay in touch throughout the season, please.
Will do.
You got
Appreciate
it.
You,
Jason McCourty right here on The Rich Eisen Show. There you have it. Catch The Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.